The Wandering Earth, Part 1. The Breaking Age. I had never known night. I had never seen the stars. Spring, autumn, and winter were words from another age. I was born near the end of the Breaking Age, just after Earth had stopped turning.
It took 42 years to break the planet's rotation, 3 years longer than the coalition government had planned. My mother once told me how our family watched the final sunset. The sun sank so slowly that it seemed to have caught on the horizon. It took 3 days and 3 nights to disappear. Of course, after that, there were no real days and no real nights. For more than a decade, the Eastern Hemisphere remained in a permanent dusk because the sun had not dropped far below the horizon and still spilled its afterglow across half the sky. I was born in that long sunset.
Dusk did not mean darkness. The Earth engines lit the entire northern hemisphere like a second firmament. They had been built on the continents of Asia and America, because only those two vast, intact plates of crust could bear the enormous thrust required to move the planet. There were 12,000 engines in all, scattered across the plains of both continents. From where I lived, I could see hundreds of their plasma beams rising into the sky. Imagine a palace so immense that the temples of the Acropolis would look small inside it. Imagine countless pillars, each one reaching from earth to heaven, each one shining blue-white like a colossal fluorescent tube. Now imagine yourself as a microbe on the floor of that palace. That was the scale of the world I grew up in.
Even that description is not quite right. The engines had to fire at an angle because it was their tangential thrust that had stopped Earth's rotation. So the giant beams in the sky leaned. We lived inside a palace that seemed forever on the verge of falling over.
More frightening than the sight was the heat. Outside, the temperature often reached 70 or 80 degrees Celsius, and no one could leave without a cooling suit. Rainstorms came often in that heat. When the engine beams cut through the clouds, the sky became a nightmare. Blue-white plasma scattered into violent halos of impossible color, as if the whole firmament had been plated with incandescent lava.
Grandfather had grown confused in his old age. Once, tormented by the heat, he saw rain outside and rushed out bare-chested before any of us could stop him. The raindrops had been heated by the superheated plasma columns. They scalded a layer of skin from his body.
But for those of us born in the northern hemisphere, all this was natural. It was as natural to us as the sun, the stars, and the moon had once been to people before the breaking age. We called all of that former history the pre-solar era. What a golden age it seemed.
When I entered primary school, our teacher took all 30 children in our class on a round-the-world field trip. By then, Earth had completely stopped rotating. The engines no longer needed to break the planet. They only held it still and made small attitude corrections. From the time I was 3 until I was 6, the beams grew much dimmer, which allowed us to see our world more clearly during that journey.
We first saw an Earth engine up close near the mouth of the Taihang Mountains, not far from Shijiazhuang. It rose before us like a mountain made of metal, filling half the sky. Beside it, the Taihang Range to the west looked like a row of dirt mounds. Some of the children gasped that it must be as tall as Everest. Our homeroom teacher, Teacher Xiaoxing, smiled and told us that this engine was 11,000 meters high, more than 2,000 meters taller than Everest. People called them God's blowtorches.
We stood inside its enormous shadow and felt its vibration traveling through the ground.
Earth engines came in 2 types. The larger ones were called mountains. The smaller ones were called peaks. We climbed North China Mountain 794. Climbing a mountain took longer than climbing a peak because peaks had giant elevators, while mountains had spiral roads. Our bus joined an endless convoy of 50-ton dump trucks and crawled upward along a smooth steel road. On our left was a blue-green metal cliff. On our right was an abyss.
At 6,000 meters, we reached a feed port. Truck after truck poured boulders into a great opening that glowed with a dark red light. Not a sound came out. I asked teacher Xiaoxing how the engine turned rock into fuel.
Heavy element fusion is too deep a subject for you right now. For the moment, remember this. The Earth engine is the most powerful machine humanity has ever built. North China 794, the engine we are standing on, can push against the ground with 15 billion tons of thrust at full power.
At last, our bus reached the summit. The nozzle was directly above us. The beam was so wide that when we raised our heads, we did not see a column. We saw a wall of blue plasma rising upward into infinity.
At that moment, I remembered a riddle from a philosophy class not long before. The teacher, pale and exhausted, had asked us,
"You are walking across a plain, and suddenly a wall stands before you. It rises infinitely high, descends infinitely deep, stretches infinitely far to the left, and infinitely far to the right." What is that wall?
A chill passed through me. I repeated the riddle to teacher Xiaoxing beside me. She thought for a long time, then shook her head, puzzled. I leaned close to her ear and whispered the terrible answer. Death.
She looked at me in silence for several seconds, then held me tightly in her arms. Over her shoulder, I saw the mist-covered land below. A forest of metal peaks rose from around us to the horizon, each one vomiting a slanted beam of light, piercing a sky that seemed ready to collapse.
Soon we reached the sea. The tips of city skyscrapers rose from the water. At low tide, white seawater poured from their countless windows, turning the buildings into waterfalls. The breaking age had only just ended, and already its marks on Earth were shocking. The tidal surges caused by engine acceleration had swallowed 2/3 of the great cities in the northern hemisphere. The global heat had melted polar ice and driven the flood farther south.
Grandfather had seen a 100-meter wave swallow Shanghai 30 years earlier. Even now, when he spoke of it, his eyes stared straight ahead. Our planet had been changed beyond recognition before it had even begun its journey. Who could know how much suffering still waited for us in the long wandering through interstellar space?
Our ship sailed for a day until the engine beams behind us disappeared. The sea lay between two glows. To the west, the blue light of the engines. To the east, the pink light of the sun, still hidden beneath the horizon. Their reflections divided the ocean into two shining halves. Our ship moved along the border between them. It was beautiful, but as the blue glow faded and the pink glow grew stronger, unease spread through the ship.
The children vanished from the deck. They hid in the cabins, and every porthole curtain was drawn tight. A day later, the moment we feared most finally arrived. In the large cabin that served as our classroom, teacher Xiaoxing announced solemnly,
"Children, we are going to watch the sunrise."
No one moved. We stared blankly, as if we had frozen where we stood. Teacher Xiaoxing urged us several times, but still no one moved. One of her male colleagues said in a low voice,
"I said from the beginning that the round-the-world experience should come before modern history. Psychologically, the students would have had an easier time.
It is not that simple. Before modern history class, they had already learned everything from the world around them.
Then she turned to a few class monitors.
You go first. Children, do not be afraid. I was nervous the first time I saw a sunrise, too. After you have seen it once, it becomes easier.
At last, one by one, the children stood and shuffled toward the hatch. Then I felt a damp little hand take mine. I turned and saw Ling Er.
I'm scared.
We've seen the sun on television. It should be the same.
How can it be the same? Is seeing a snake on television the same as seeing a real one?
Anyway, we have to go. Otherwise, this class will count against our grade.
Linger and I held each other's hands tightly and followed the other children toward the deck, trembling as we went to face the first sunrise of our lives.
Human beings have linked the sun with fear only for the last 3 or 4 centuries. Before that, people were not afraid of it. To them, the sun was solemn and magnificent. Earth was still turning then. People saw sunrise and sunset every day. They cheered the rising sun and praised the beauty of evening light.
Teacher Xiaoxing spoke to us from the bow. The sea wind lifted her long hair. Behind her, beams of light broke from the line where sea met sky, like the breath of some unimaginable creature beneath the water.
At last we saw the terrifying flame. At first, it was only a bright point on the horizon. Then it grew, and the curve of a disk began to show itself. Something seemed to close around my throat. Fear choked me. The deck beneath my feet vanished in my mind, and I felt myself falling into the abyss of the sea. Linger fell with me, her fragile body pressed against mine and trembling like spider silk. The other children fell too. Everyone fell. The whole world was falling. I remembered the riddle again. I had once asked the philosophy teacher what color that wall should be, and he said, black. I thought he was wrong. In my mind, the wall of death was white, hot, which was why the plasma wall had reminded me of it. In our age, death was no longer black. It was the color of lightning. When the final lightning came, the world would turn to vapor in an instant.
More than 3 centuries earlier, astrophysicists discovered that hydrogen inside the sun was converting into helium at an abruptly accelerating rate. They launched more than 10,000 probes through the sun and finally built a complete and precise mathematical model of the star.
The supercomputers showed that the sun had drifted away from the main sequence. Helium fusion would spread through its interior in a very short time, producing a violent explosion called a helium flash. Afterward, the sun would become a gigantic but dim red giant, swelling so enormous that Earth would orbit inside it.
In truth, Earth would be vaporized by the helium flash before that ever happened. All of this would occur within 400 years. 380 had already passed.
The solar catastrophe would destroy or swallow every habitable terrestrial planet in the solar system, and it would reshape the orbits and forms of the gas giants. After the first helium flash, as heavy elements repeatedly gathered at the sun's core, the flashes would recur for a period of time. In stellar evolution, that period might be brief. For human history, it could span thousands of civilizations.
So humanity could not survive in the future solar system. The only road left was migration into interstellar space. With the technology we had, the only possible destination for the whole species was Proxima Centauri, the nearest star, 4.3 light-years away. On that, humanity had reached consensus. The argument was over how to get there.
To strengthen the lesson, our ship turned back twice in the Pacific and gave us 2 more sunrises. By then we had adapted, and we believed that the children of the Southern Hemisphere really could live beneath the sun every day.
After that, we sailed in sunlight. The sun climbed higher, and the cool weather of the last few days began to warm. I was dozing in my cabin when I heard a commotion outside. Linger pushed the door open and stuck her head in.
Hey, the ship faction and the Earth faction are fighting again.
I had little interest in it. They had been fighting for 4 centuries. Still, I went out to look. Among the boys wrestling together, I spotted the instigator at once. A Dong. His father was a stubborn ship faction supporter and was still in prison for taking part in an anti-coalition riot. Like father, like son.
Teacher Xiao Xing and several burly sailors finally dragged them apart. Blood covered Adong's nose. He raised his fist and shouted,
Throw the Earth faction into the sea!
I am Earth faction too. Should I be thrown into the sea?
Teacher Xiao Xing asked.
Throw all Earth faction people into the sea!
The Dong did not back down. Around the world, ship faction anger was rising again, and that made them bold.
Why do you hate us so much?
Teacher Xiao Xing asked. Several other ship faction boys shouted after him.
We will not stay on Earth with fools and wait to die! We want to leave on ships. Long live the ships!
Silence spread for a moment.
Teacher Xiao Xing tapped the holographic display on her wrist. An image appeared in the air before us, and the children's attention snapped toward it. It was a sealed glass sphere, transparent and bright, about 10 centimeters across. 2/3 of it was filled with water. Inside were a tiny shrimp, a sprig of coral, and green algae. The shrimp drifted lazily through the water. Teacher Xiao Xing said,
This is one of Adong's nature class design projects. Besides what you can see, there are invisible bacteria in the sphere. They depend on one another inside the sealed glass world. The shrimp eats the algae and takes oxygen from the water. It excretes organic waste and carbon dioxide. The bacteria break those wastes into inorganic matter and carbon dioxide. Then the algae use those substances and artificial sunlight to photosynthesize, grow, reproduce, and release oxygen for the shrimp to breathe.
In theory, that ecological cycle should let the life inside the sphere continue as long as sunlight is supplied. It is the best class project I have ever seen. I know it contains a Dong's dream, and the dream of all the ship faction children. This is the miniature of the spacecraft you imagine. A Dong told me that he used strict mathematical models in the computer to genetically design every organism in the sphere, so their metabolisms would balance perfectly. He believed the little world would live for a long time, until the shrimp reached the end of its natural life.
The teachers loved this project. We placed it under artificial sunlight of the required intensity and believed in Adong's prediction. We silently blessed this small world he had created. But now, only a dozen days have passed.
Teacher Xiao Xing carefully took the sphere from a small case she carried. The dead shrimp floated on the surface. The water was cloudy. The rotting algae had lost their green and become a lifeless fuzz covering the coral.
This little world is dead. Children, can anyone tell me why?
Teacher Xiao Xing held the dead world before us.
It was too small.
That is right. Too small. A small ecosystem, no matter how precise, cannot endure the storms of time. The ships the ship faction imagines are the same.
Our ships can be built as large as Shanghai or New York.
A Dong said, but his voice was much lower now.
Yes. With present technology that is about as large as humanity can build them. But compared with Earth, such an ecosystem is still too small. Far too small.
We will find new planets.
You do not even believe that yourselves. There are no planets around Alpha Centauri. The nearest star known to have planets is 850 light-years away. The fastest ship humanity can build reaches only half of 1% of light speed. It would take 170,000 years to get there, and an ecosystem the size of a spacecraft could not survive even a tenth of that. Children, Only an ecosystem on the scale of Earth, only a cycle of life this vast and magnificent can keep life alive through the generations. For humanity, leaving Earth in the universe would be like an infant leaving its mother in the desert.
But teacher, there is not enough time. Earth will not make it. It cannot accelerate fast enough or travel far enough before the sun explodes.
There is enough time. You must trust the coalition government. How many times have I said this? And even if you cannot believe it, let us take 10,000 steps back. Humanity will die proudly, because we will have done everything we could.
Humanity's escape had 5 steps. First, the Earth engines would stop Earth's rotation and fix their nozzles opposite the direction of orbital motion. Second, the engines would fire at full power and accelerate Earth to escape velocity, driving it out of the solar system. Third, in deep space, Earth would continue accelerating toward Proxima Centauri. Fourth, midway through the voyage, Earth would resume rotation, turn the engines around, and begin to decelerate. Fifth, Earth would enter orbit around Proxima and become its satellite.
These 5 steps were called the breaking age, the escape age, the wandering age 1, the acceleration phase, the wandering age 2, the deceleration phase, and the new sun age. The whole migration would last 2,500 years, 100 generations.
Our ship sailed on into the night side of Earth, where neither sunlight nor engine beams could reach. In the cool Atlantic wind, we children saw the stars for the first time. What a sight it was! It was beautiful enough to make the heart ache. Teacher Xiaoxing held us with one arm and pointed to the sky with the other. Look, children, that is Centaurus. That is Proxima. That is our new home. Then she began to cry, and we cried with her. Around us, the sailors and the captain, men hard as steel, also shed tears.
Everyone looked through tears toward the place she had pointed. The star field twisted and trembled in our wet eyes, but that one star seemed still. It was the lighthouse of distant land above a black and stormy sea. It was a fire glimpsed ahead by a lonely traveler freezing in a snowfield. It was the sun in our hearts, the only hope and support humanity would have through the suffering of the next 100 generations.
On the voyage home, we saw the first sign of departure. A great comet appeared in the night sky. It was the moon. Humanity could not take the moon, so planetary engines had been installed on it too, pushing it out of Earth's orbit so it would not collide with Earth during acceleration. The enormous comet tail, produced by those lunar engines, bathed the sea in blue light and hid the stars. The gravitational tide, raised by the moon's movement, drove great waves into the sky, and we changed to an aircraft to fly home to the southern hemisphere.
At last, launch day arrived.
The moment we stepped from the plane, the Earth engine beams dazzled us blind. They were several times brighter than before, and every beam had shifted from slanted to vertical. The engines were at maximum power. 100-meter waves created by the acceleration roared onto every continent. Scalding hurricanes, mixed with boiling spray, howled madly among the towering columns of plasma and tore every tree from the land. Seen from space, our planet had become a giant comet, its blue tail piercing the darkness.
Earth set out. Humanity set out. Grandfather died at launch. The burns on his body had become infected. In his final moments, he kept repeating one sentence.
Ah, Earth, my wandering Earth. Part 2. The Escape Age.
Our school was moving into an underground city, and we were among its first residents. The school bus entered a tall tunnel, sloping gently downward. After half an hour, we were told we had entered the city, but outside the window, there was nothing that looked like a city. We saw only a maze of branch tunnels, countless sealed doors in the walls, and rows of floodlights high above. Everything was the same metallic blue. Thinking that most of the rest of our lives would be spent in this world, we fell silent with grief.
Primitive people lived in caves. Now we live in caves again.
Linger said it softly, but Teacher Xiaoxing still heard.
There is no other way, children. The surface will soon become very, very terrible. When it is cold, if you spit, the spit will freeze into an ice bead before it reaches the ground. When it is hot, if you spit, it will turn to steam before it reaches the ground.
I understand the cold because Earth is moving farther from the sun. But why will it be hot?
A younger child on the bus asked.
Idiot! Have you never learned orbital acceleration?
I said irritably.
No!
Linger explained patiently, as if trying to distract herself from the sadness.
It is like this. The Earth engines are not as strong as you think. They can give Earth only a tiny acceleration. They cannot push the planet out of solar orbit all at once. Before Earth leaves the sun, it has to circle the sun 15 more times. During those 15 loops, it slowly speeds up. Right now, Earth goes around the sun in a nearly round orbit. The faster it goes, the flatter that orbit becomes. Flatter and faster, faster and flatter, and the sun shifts more and more toward one end of the ellipse. Later, Earth will sometimes be very, very far from the sun, so of course it will be cold.
But that still is not right. When Earth is at the far end, it will be cold. But at the other end of the ellipse, it will be as close to the sun as it is now, according to orbital mechanics. Why would it be hotter?
He was a little genius. Memory heredity technology had made children like him common, and that was humanity's good fortune. Otherwise, a miracle like the Earth engines, something even gods would not have dared imagine, could never have become real in 4 centuries. I said,
Because there are still the Earth engines, little fool. More than 10,000 giant blowtorches running at full power will make Earth into the nozzle shield of a rocket. Now be quiet, I am upset.
That was how we began life underground. Cities with more than 1 million people, buried 500 meters deep, spread across every continent. In those cities, I finished primary school and entered middle school. Education focused almost entirely on science and engineering. Art and philosophy had been compressed to a minimum. Humanity no longer had the leisure for them. It was the busiest age in human history. Everyone had more work than they could finish. Interestingly, every religion on Earth vanished overnight. People finally understood that even if God existed, he was a bastard.
History classes remained, but the human history of the pre-solar era felt to us like myths from Eden.
My father was an Air Force astronaut in near-Earth orbit and rarely came home. I remember that in the 5th year of orbital acceleration, when Earth reached aphelion, our family went to the seashore. The day Earth reached the top of aphelion was a festival like New Year or Christmas, because the planet was at its farthest point from the sun and people felt an illusory sense of safety. As always, when we went to the surface, we had to wear fully sealed heating suits powered by nuclear batteries.
Outside, the blinding columns of Earth engines were the main visible things. The rest of the surface world was drowned in their glare, and it was hard to see any change. We rode a flying car for a long time until we reached a place beyond the beams, a coast where the sun could be seen. By then, the sun was the size of a baseball, hanging motionless near the horizon. Its light made only a faint dawn-colored halo around itself. The sky was a dark, deep blue, and the stars were still clear. Looking out, there was no sea. Before us lay a white ice plain.
Crowds were celebrating on the frozen ocean. Fireworks opened in the dark blue sky.
People on the ice reveled with abnormal intensity. Drunken bodies rolled everywhere, and still more people were singing different songs at the tops of their lungs, each trying to drown out the others.
Everyone is living the life they want, at any cost. That is not necessarily bad.
Then Father suddenly remembered something.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. I have fallen in love with Li Xing. I am leaving you to be with her.
Who is she?
Mother asked calmly.
My primary school teacher.
I answered for him. I had been in middle school for 2 years. I did not know how Father had met teacher Xiaoxing. Perhaps at the graduation ceremony 2 years earlier.
Then go.
Mother said.
After a while, I will probably get tired of it and come back. What do you think?
If you want to, of course. Mother's voice was as smooth as the frozen sea, but she soon grew excited.
Ah, that one is beautiful. There must be holographic scatterers inside it.
She pointed at a firework that had just opened in the sky and praised it with genuine delight.
In that age, people were baffled when they watched films or read novels from 4 centuries earlier. They could not understand how people of the pre-solar era had poured so much feeling into matters unrelated to life and death. When they saw heroes and heroines suffer or weep over love, their astonishment was beyond description. In our time, the threat of death and the desire to escape overwhelmed everything. Nothing could truly move anyone except the current state of the sun and Earth's position.
That concentration of attention gradually changed the essence of human psychology and spiritual life. People only glanced at love from the corner of the eye, the way a gambler watching a roulette wheel might seize a few seconds between spins to drink water.
2 months later, Father did come back from teacher Xiaoxing. Mother was neither pleased nor displeased. Father said to me,
Li Xing thought well of you. She said you were a creative student.
Mother looked blank.
Who is she?
Teacher Xiaoxing, my primary school teacher. Father has been with her for the last 2 months.
Oh, I remember now.
Mother shook her head and smiled.
I am not even 40, and my memory is already like this.
She looked up at the holographic star field on the ceiling, then at the holographic forest on the walls.
It is good that you are back. Change these images, please. The child and I are tired of them, and neither of us knows how to adjust this thing.
When Earth began falling toward the sun again, our whole family had forgotten the matter.
One day, the news reported that the sea was melting, so our family went to the shore again. Earth was passing the orbit of Mars. Judging by the amount of sunlight, the surface should still have been very cold, but because of the Earth engines, the temperature was pleasant. It felt wonderful to go outside without a heating suit or a cooling suit. On the engine hemisphere, the sky looked as it always had. But when we reached the other side, we truly felt the sun approaching. The sky was a clear, pure blue, and the sun shone as brightly as it had before launch.
From the air, however, the sea had not melted. It was still a white ice plain. When we stepped from the flying car in disappointment, we heard an earth-shaking rumble. It seemed to come from the deepest part of the planet, as if Earth itself were about to explode.
That is the sound of the sea,
Father said.
Because the temperature has risen so suddenly, the thick ice is heating unevenly. It is much like an earthquake on land.
Then a sharp thunderclap tore through the low rumble, and the people behind us who had come to watch the sea cheered. I saw a long crack split the surface. It opened so fast that it was like a black bolt of lightning flashing across the vast ice plain. Then, amid continuous detonations, crack after crack appeared. Seawater burst from all of them and formed rushing streams that spread rapidly across the ice.
On the way home, we saw wild grass pushing through the long barren ground in great patches. Flowers bloomed fiercely. Tender leaves dressed dead forests in green. All life was rushing to spend its strength while it still could.
As Earth drew closer to the sun,
People's hearts tightened day by day. Fewer came to the surface to admire the spring colors. Most hid deep in the underground cities, not from the coming heat, rainstorms, and hurricanes, but from the fear that grew as the sun came nearer. One night after I had gone to bed, I heard Mother whisper to Father,
"Maybe we really will not make it in time."
Father said.
There were rumors like this at the last 4 perihelions.
But this time it is true. I heard it from Dr. Chandler's wife. Her husband is the astronomer on the navigation committee. You know who he is. He told her himself that the accumulation of helium is accelerating.
Listen to me, my dear. We must have hope, not because hope truly exists, but because we must be noble. In the pre-solar era, to be noble one needed money, power, or talent. Today, one only needs hope. Hope is the gold and jewels of our age. However long we live, we must possess it. Tell the child that tomorrow.
Like everyone else, I grew restless as perihelion approached. One day after school, I wandered without thinking to the central square of the city. I stood beside the circular pool around the fountain, sometimes looking down into the blue glowing water, sometimes up at the dreamlike ripples of light reflected onto the domed ceiling. Then I saw Linger. She was holding a small bottle and a little tube, blowing soap bubbles. Each time she blew a string of them, she stared blankly as they floated and vanished, then blew another string.
You were too old for that. Is it fun?
I walked over and asked her. The Linger was delighted to see me.
Let's go on a trip.
A trip? Where?
To the surface, of course.
She swept her hand through the air and threw a holographic scene from the computer on her wrist. It showed a beach at sunset. A breeze stirred palm trees. White waves rolled in. On the golden sand, couples stood in pairs as black silhouettes before a sea covered with broken gold.
Mona and the gang sent this back. They are still traveling all over the world. They said it is not too hot outside yet, and it is wonderful. Let's go.
They were just expelled for skipping school.
You are not afraid of that. You are afraid of the sun.
Aren't you? Do not forget, you went to a psychiatrist because you were afraid of the sun.
But I am different now. I have had a revelation. Look!
Linger blew a string of bubbles through the little tube.
Watch it!
She pointed at one bubble.
I stared at it and saw storms of light and color racing across its surface. Their complexity and fineness were beyond human perception, as if the bubble knew the length of its own life and was madly performing all the dreams and legends in its ocean of memory. Soon the storm vanished in a silent explosion. I saw a faint patch of vapor, barely there. It lasted half a second, and then there was nothing, as if nothing had ever existed.
Did you see? Earth is just a little bubble in the universe. Pop and everything is gone. What is there to be afraid of?
It is not like that. According to the calculations, when the helium flash occurs, it will take at least 100 hours for Earth to be completely vaporized.
That is exactly the most frightening part.
Linger cried out.
Down here, 500 meters underground, we will be like meat inside a pie. First, we will be slowly roasted, then vaporized.
A chill ran through my whole body.
But on the surface, it will be different. Everything there will evaporate instantly. People on the ground will be like that bubble. Pop, so when the helium flash comes, it is better to be on the surface.
For reasons I still do not know, I did not go with her. She went with Adong instead. I never saw either of them again.
The helium flash did not occur. Earth skimmed through perihelion at high speed and rose toward aphelion for the 6th time. Humanity's taut nerves slackened. Because Earth no longer rotated, the engines on the Asian continent faced the direction of orbital motion on this side of the solar orbit. So before perihelion, they had been shut down except for occasional attitude corrections. We lived in a quiet, endless night. The engines on the American continent ran at full power, turning that side of Earth into the shield of a rocket nozzle.
Since the sun was also in the western hemisphere then, the heat there was even more terrible. Vegetation smoked where it stood.
Year after year, Earth's orbital acceleration continued. Whenever Earth climbed toward aphelion, people's hearts relaxed as the distance from the sun increased. Whenever Earth fell toward the sun in a new year, their hearts tightened day by day. At every perihelion, rumors burst out across society that the helium flash would occur then. Only when Earth rose again toward aphelion did fear subside with the shrinking sun in the sky, and then it began brewing the next fear.
Humanity's spirit was swinging on a cosmic swing. More accurately, it was playing cosmic Russian roulette. Climbing toward aphelion and falling toward the sun spun the cylinder. Passing perihelion pulled the trigger. Each pull strained the nerves more than the last. I spent my youth in that alternation of fear. If one thought carefully, even at aphelion Earth had not escaped the lethal range of the helium flash. If the sun erupted then, Earth would not be vaporized, but slowly liquefied. That fate might be worse than perihelion.
In the escape age, disasters came one after another.
The acceleration from the Earth engines and the changes in orbit disturbed the balance of Earth's iron-nickel core. The disturbance crossed the Gutenberg discontinuity and spread into the mantle. Geothermal energy vented across the continents, and volcanoes raged everywhere. For underground cities, this was a deadly threat. After the sixth orbital cycle, magma infiltration became frequent in underground cities on every continent.
The day the alarm sounded, I was walking home from school. I heard the City Hall broadcast.
Attention, all citizens of City F1112. The northern barrier has been damaged by ground stress. Magma infiltration. Magma infiltration. The magma flow has reached District 4. The highway exit is sealed. All citizens proceed to Central Square and evacuate to the surface by elevator. Attention. Evacuation will follow Article 5 of the Emergency Act. Repeat. Evacuation will follow Article 5 of the Emergency Act.
I looked around at the maze of passages. Nothing in the underground city seemed abnormal, but I knew the danger. There were only 2 underground highways leading outside. One had been blocked the previous year to reinforce the barrier. If the remaining one was blocked too, the only way out would be the elevators that rose straight to the surface through vertical shafts.
The elevators had little capacity. Evacuating 360,000 people would take a long time. But there was no need to fight for survival. The coalition government's Emergency Act had arranged everything.
There had once been an ancient ethical question. When a flood came and a man could save only one person, should he save his father or his son? To people of our age, the question itself was incomprehensible.
When I reached Central Square, people had already formed long lines by age. Nearest the elevator entrance were infants held by robot nurses, then kindergarten children, then primary school students. I was near the front of the middle section. Father was on duty in near-Earth orbit. Only Mother and I were in the city. I could not see her, so I ran along the line, but soldiers stopped me before I had gone far. I knew she was near the end. The city was mainly a school district with few families, and she counted among the older group.
The line moved with a slowness that set the heart on fire. 3 hours later, when it was my turn to step into the elevator, I felt no relief. Between Mother and survival still stood more than 20,000 university students. By then I could already smell sulfur.
2.5 hours after I reached the surface, magma swallowed the entire city 500 meters below. I imagined Mother's last moments with a pain like a knife in the heart. She and 18,000 others who had not escaped would have watched magma pour into Central Square. The power would have failed. The only light in the underground city would have been the terrifying dark red glow of molten rock. The high white dome of the square would slowly blacken in the heat. Those who died may never have touched the magma. The 1,000-degree heat would have taken them first.
But life continued. In that harsh and fearful reality, love still flashed, now and then, with an enchanting light. To ease people's tension, when Earth reached aphelion for the 12th time, the coalition government actually revived the Olympic Games after a 2-century interruption. I competed in the motorized ice sled rally. The course began in Shanghai, crossed the frozen Pacific, and ended in New York.
After the starting gun, more than 100 sleds rushed across the frozen ocean at about 200 kilometers per hour. A few sleds stayed near me at first, but 2 days later they had vanished beyond the horizon. Some ahead, some behind.
By then, the glow of the Earth engines behind me could no longer be seen. I was in Earth's darkest region. To my eyes, the world consisted only of the vast starry sky and an ice plain spreading endlessly in every direction. The ice seemed to run to the edge of the universe, or perhaps it was the edge of the universe. In that universe of infinite stars and infinite ice, I was alone. An avalanche of loneliness crushed me. I wanted to cry. I drove desperately. My ranking no longer mattered. I only wanted to escape that terrible loneliness before it killed me. But the imagined far shore seemed not to exist.
Then I saw a figure on the horizon. When I drew nearer, I found it was a young woman standing beside her sled, her long hair blowing in the cold wind over the ice. You know what meeting a young woman then meant? The rest of our lives were decided. She was Japanese, named Yamaaki Kayoko. The women's group had started 12 hours earlier. Her sled was caught in an ice crack, and one runner had snapped. As I helped repair it, I told her what I had just felt.
You are exactly right. I felt the same thing. Yes, as if I were the only person in the whole universe. Do you know, when I saw you appear in the distance, it was like seeing the sun rise.
Then why did you not call a rescue plane?
This race is meant to embody the human spirit. You must know that the wandering Earth cannot call for rescue in the universe.
She waved her small fist with a Japanese kind of stubbornness.
But now you have to call one. Neither of us has a spare runner. Your sled cannot be fixed.
Then may I ride with you? If you do not care about your ranking.
Of course I did not care. So Kayoko and I crossed the rest of the frozen Pacific together. After Hawaii, we saw dawn on the horizon. On the boundless ice plain lit by that tiny sun, we sent a marriage application to the coalition government's Ministry of Civil Affairs.
When we reached New York, the race judges had long since grown impatient and left. But a civil affairs officer was waiting. He congratulated us on our marriage, then performed his duty. With a wave of his hand, he drew a hologram in the air. Tens of thousands of dots were arranged across it, representing the number of couples worldwide who had registered for marriage during those days. Because conditions were so severe, the law allowed only one of every 3 newly married couples to have the right to bear a child. Decided by lottery. Kayoko hesitated for a long time before the dots, then touched one near the center.
When the dot turned green, she jumped with joy. I did not know what I felt. Was it fortune or misfortune for my child to be born in this age of suffering?
The officer, however, was delighted. He said he was always happy when a couple's dot turned green. He took out a bottle of vodka, and the three of us passed it around, each taking a sip, toasting the continuation of humanity.
Behind us, the distant sun gilded the Statue of Liberty with weak light. Opposite it stood the deserted skyscrapers of Manhattan, their long shadows cast by faint sunlight across the silent ice of New York Harbor. In my drunken haze, tears rose in my eyes. Earth, my wandering Earth.
Before we parted, the officer handed us a set of keys and said drunkenly,
"This is the home assigned to you in Asia. Go home. Ah, home is such a good thing."
What is good about it?
I said indifferently.
Asia's underground cities are full of danger. Of course, you people in the Western Hemisphere cannot feel that.
Soon we will have dangers you cannot feel. Earth is going through the asteroid belt again, and this time the Western Hemisphere is facing the direction of travel.
We passed through the asteroid belt in earlier orbital cycles, and nothing serious happened, did it?
That was only skimming the edge of the belt. Of course, the space fleet could handle it. They used lasers and nuclear bombs to clear the small rocks from Earth's path. But this time, have you not seen the news? This time, Earth is going through the middle of the asteroid belt. The fleet can only deal with the big ones.
On the flight back to Asia, Kayoko asked me,
Are those rocks very large?
My father was now doing that work in the space fleet. So although the government, as usual, suppressed information to avoid panic, I knew a little. I told Kayoko that some of the rocks were as large as mountains, and a 50-megaton thermonuclear bomb would only blast a small crater into one.
They are about to use the most powerful weapon humanity possesses.
I told Kayoko mysteriously.
You mean antimatter bombs?
What else?
How far can the space fleet patrol?
Their strength is limited now. My father said only about 1.5 million kilometers.
Ah, then we can see it.
Better not.
Kayoko watched anyway, and without eye protection. The first flash of an antimatter bomb came from space shortly after our takeoff, while she was admiring the stars outside the cabin window. It blinded her for more than an hour, and for over a month her eyes stayed red, swollen, and wet with tears. It was a terrifying time. Antimatter shells struck asteroids one after another. The light of annihilation flared in the blackness of space, as if a crowd of giants around Earth were taking photographs with flashbulbs.
Half an hour later, we saw fire meteors. They dragged long tails of flame across the sky with a terrifying beauty. More and more appeared, and each traveled farther before burning out. Suddenly the aircraft shook with a tremendous bang, followed by more bangs and tremors. Kayoko cried out and threw herself into my arms. She clearly thought the plane had been hit. Then the captain's voice sounded in the cabin.
Passengers, please do not panic. These are sonic booms produced by meteors breaking the sound barrier. Please put on your headsets or your hearing may suffer permanent damage. Because flight safety can no longer be guaranteed, we will make an emergency landing in Hawaii.
I fixed my eyes on one fire meteor. It was much larger than the others, and I did not believe it could burn up in the atmosphere. Sure enough, the fireball crossed more than half the sky, shrinking as it went, but still plunged into the frozen sea. From 10,000 meters up, I saw a small white point appear, where it struck the surface. The point spread at once into a white ring, and the ring expanded rapidly across the sea.
Is that a wave?
Kayoko asked in a trembling voice.
Yes, a wave. More than 100 meters high. But the sea is frozen. The ice will weaken it quickly.
I comforted myself and stopped looking down. We soon landed in Honolulu, and the local government arranged for us to enter an underground city.
Our car drove along the coast. The sky was full of fire meteors. Those red-haired demons seemed to erupt all at once from a single point in space.
A meteor struck the sea not far from the shore. We did not see a water column, but a white mushroom cloud of steam rose high into the sky. The surge passed under the ice to the shore, and the thick ice broke with a grinding roar. The ice surface took on the shape of waves, as if a line of soft giant beasts were swimming beneath it.
How large was that one?
I asked the official who had come to receive us.
No more than 5 kilograms. Probably no bigger than your head. But we just got word that one about 20 tons came down on the sea 800 kilometers north.
Then the communicator on his wrist sounded. He glanced at it and told the driver,
"There is no time to reach Gate 204. Find the nearest entrance."
The car turned and stopped before an underground city entrance. After we got out, we saw several soldiers at the gate. They were staring motionless in one direction, their eyes full of terror. We followed their gaze. At the line between sea and sky, we saw a black barrier. At first, it looked like a low cloud bank on the horizon, but the top of the cloud was too even, like a long wall stretched across the world. Looking closer, we saw a thin white edge along its crest.
What is that?
Kayoko asked a nearby officer timidly. His answer made our hair stand on end.
A wave!
The massive iron door of the underground city closed with a roar. About 10 minutes later, we felt a low sound through the ground, a rolling rumble like a giant turning over on the surface. We looked at one another. Everyone knew that a 100-meter wave was rolling across Hawaii and would roll across every continent. But another kind of vibration was even more frightening, as if a giant fist in space were striking Earth again and again. Underground. The shaking was faint, but every tremor reached the depths of the soul. Meteors were still striking the planet.
The brutal bombardment of our world continued on and off for a week. When we emerged from the underground city, Kayoko cried out,
God, why is the sky like this?
The sky was gray. Dust from asteroid impacts on land filled the upper atmosphere. Stars and sun had vanished into that endless gray, as if fog had swallowed the universe. On the ground, seawater left by the towering waves had frozen before it could drain away. The surviving high rises of the city stood lonely on the ice, hung with long icicles. Impact dust covered the ice. The world had only one color left, gray.
Kayoko and I continued our journey back to Asia. When the plane crossed the now meaningless international dateline, we saw the blackest night humanity had ever seen. The plane seemed to be swimming through an ocean of ink. Looking out at a world without a trace of light, our hearts sank to their lowest point.
When will it end?
Kayoko murmured. I did not know whether she meant the journey or this life of suffering and disaster. I felt that both had no end. Even if Earth sailed beyond the reach of the helium flash and survived, what then? We were only the lowest step of a long staircase. When our 100th generation descendants climbed to the top and saw the light of a new life, our bones would be ash.
I did not dare imagine the suffering and hardship ahead, and I dared even less to imagine carrying my wife and child along that endless muddy road. I was tired. I truly could not go on. Just as grief and despair were choking me, a woman's cry rang through the cabin.
No, you cannot, darling.
I turned toward the sound and saw the woman pulling a pistol from the hands of the man beside her. He had clearly been trying to press the muzzle to his temple. He was thin and weak, his dull eyes fixed on some infinite distance ahead. The woman buried her head on his knees and began to sob.
Quiet, the man said coldly. The crying stopped. Only the hum of the aircraft engines remained, like an unchanging funeral song.
In my mind, the plane had stuck fast inside that vast darkness and no longer moved. Apart from darkness and the plane, the universe contained nothing. Kayoko pressed herself tightly against me, her whole body cold.
Suddenly, there was a stir at the front of the cabin, and people began whispering excitedly. I looked out the window and saw a hazy glow ahead. It was blue, shapeless, and evenly spread through the impact dust-filled night sky before us. It was the light of the Earth engines.
1/3 of the engines in the Western Hemisphere had been destroyed by meteors, but the losses were smaller than pre-launch predictions. The engines in the Eastern Hemisphere, facing away from the impact side, were intact. In terms of power, they could still complete Earth's escape voyage. To me, that blurred blue glow ahead was like the light of the sea surface seen after a long ascent from the deep. My breathing eased again. I heard the woman's voice once more.
Darling, pain and fear are things only the living can feel. When you are dead, there is nothing. Only darkness. It is still better to live, isn't it?
The thin man did not answer. He stared at the blue light ahead, and tears ran down his face. I knew he would live. As long as that blue light of hope still shone, all of us could live. I remembered Father's words about hope.
After landing, Kayoko and I did not go to our new home in the underground city. We went instead to the Space Fleet base on the surface to find my father. At the base, I found only a cold medal awarded to him after death. An Air Force Major General gave it to me. He told me that during the operation to clear asteroids from Earth's route, a fragment blasted from an asteroid by an antimatter bomb had struck Father's single-seat microcraft.
The relative velocity between the fragment and the craft was 100 kilometers per second. The impact vaporized the cockpit instantly. He felt no pain at all. I assure you, no pain at all.
The general said, when Earth fell toward the sun again, Kayoko and I went to the surface to see spring, but there was no spring to see.
The world was still gray. Beneath the dim sky, frozen lakes formed from leftover seawater dotted the land, and not a trace of green remained. Impact dust in the atmosphere blocked the sunlight, making it difficult for temperatures to rise. Even at perihelion, the oceans and land did not thaw. The sun was a hazy halo, like a ghost behind the dust.
Only 3 years later did the impact dust in the sky begin to disperse. Humanity finally passed perihelion for the last time and rose toward aphelion. At that perihelion, the people of the Eastern Hemisphere were fortunate enough to witness the fastest sunrise and sunset in Earth's history. The sun leapt from the sea horizon, swept rapidly across the sky, and the shadows of all things changed angle, like countless second hands on clocks. It was also the shortest day Earth had ever known, lasting less than 1 hour.
When the sun fell below the horizon, an hour later, and darkness covered the land, I felt a sudden sadness. That fleeting day seemed like a brief summary of Earth's 4.5 billion-year evolution in the solar system. Until the end of the universe, it would never return.
It is dark,
Kayoko said sorrowfully.
The longest night.
I said, for the Eastern Hemisphere, that night would last 2,500 years. Only after 100 generations would the dawn of Centaurus light this continent again. The Western Hemisphere would face the longest day, though it would be far shorter than our night. There the sun would soon rise to the zenith and remain there, slowly shrinking, until within half a century it merged with the stars and became hard to distinguish.
According to the planned route, Earth rose toward its rendezvous with Jupiter. The Navigation Committee's plan was this. Earth's 15th orbit would be so elongated that its aphelion reached Jupiter's orbit. Earth would pass Jupiter at a distance just short of collision, and under Jupiter's enormous gravity, Earth would finally reach escape velocity.
2 months after leaving perihelion, Jupiter became visible to the naked eye. At first, it was only a blurred point of light, but soon it showed a disk. A month later, it was the size of the full moon in Earth's sky, dark red, with faint stripes visible on its face. Some of the Earth engine beams, which had been vertical for 15 years, began to sway as Earth made its final attitude adjustments before the encounter. Jupiter gradually sank below the horizon. For more than 3 months after that, it remained on the far side of Earth, invisible to us, but we knew the two planets were meeting.
One day we were suddenly told that the Eastern Hemisphere would be able to see Jupiter too. People poured from the underground cities to the surface. When I stepped through the city's sealed gate, I found that the Earth engines, which had been running for 15 years, were all shut down. I saw the stars again. That meant the final encounter with Jupiter was underway. Everyone stared tensely toward the western horizon, where a dark red glow had appeared. The glowing region expanded until it stretched across the entire horizon.
Then I noticed that between the dark red region and the black starry sky above it lay a neat boundary, curved like an arc. That immense arc stretched from one end of the horizon to the other, and slowly rose. Beneath it, the whole sky turned dark red, as if a curtain as large as the star field were separating Earth from the universe. When I finally understood, I drew in a breath. The dark red curtain was Jupiter. I had always known Jupiter's volume was 1,300 times Earth's. Only then did I truly feel its size.
The fear and oppression produced by that cosmic monster rising across the entire horizon cannot be described. A reporter later wrote,
I do not know whether I am trapped in a nightmare, or whether the entire universe is a nightmare inside the vast and diseased mind of its creator.
Jupiter rose terribly, gradually filling half the sky. We could clearly see storms in its cloud layers, twisting them into bewildering, chaotic lines. I knew that beneath those thick clouds were boiling oceans of liquid hydrogen and helium. The famous Great Red Spot appeared, a vortex that had lasted hundreds of thousands of years and was large enough to swallow 3 Earths. Now Jupiter filled the whole sky, and Earth seemed like a balloon floating above its boiling dark red cloud sea.
The Great Red Spot hung at the center of the sky like a giant red eye staring at our world, bathing the land in its sinister light. At that moment, no one could believe small Earth would escape the gravity of that monster. From the ground, Earth did not even seem capable of becoming Jupiter's satellite. It seemed certain we would fall into the hell beneath that endless sea of clouds.
But the navigation engineers' calculations were precise. The confused, dark red sky moved slowly. After an unknown time, a black corner appeared on the western horizon. It expanded rapidly, and stars glittered within it. Earth was breaking free of Jupiter's gravitational grasp. Then alarms screamed. The tidal surge raised by Jupiter was advancing inland. We later learned that this great tide, with waves more than 100 meters high, swept across the continents once again.
As I ran into the sealed gate of the underground city, I looked back one last time at Jupiter, still filling half the sky. I saw a clear scar in its cloud sea. Later, I learned that it was the mark of Earth's gravity on Jupiter's surface. Our planet had also raised mountain-high waves of liquid hydrogen and helium on Jupiter. At that moment, Jupiter's immense gravity was accelerating Earth and flinging it into deep space.
When Earth left Jupiter, it had reached escape velocity. It no longer needed to return to the sun that held death. It flew toward the vastness beyond, and the long wandering age began. Under Jupiter's dark red shadow deep inside the strata, my son was born, Part 3.
rebellion.
After leaving Jupiter, more than 10,000 Earth engines on the Asian continent fired at full power again. This time, they would run without stopping for 500 years, accelerating Earth continuously. Over those 5 centuries, the engines would consume half the mountains of Asia as fuel.
Released from more than 4 centuries of fear of death, people breathed a long sigh. But the expected celebration did not come. What happened next was beyond anyone's imagination.
After a celebration in the underground city, I put on a sealed suit and went alone to the surface. The mountains familiar from my childhood had been leveled by super excavators. The land held only exposed rock and hard permafrost. White patches lay everywhere on the frozen ground, salt left by the great tides. Before me, the great city where grandfather and father had spent their lives, once home to tens of millions, was now a ruin. The exposed steel skeletons of high rises cast long shadows in the blue light of the Earth engines, like fossils of prehistoric beasts. Flood after flood and asteroid impact after asteroid impact had destroyed everything on the surface. Cities and vegetation were gone from every continent. Earth's surface had become a wasteland like Mars.
During that time, Kayoko became restless. She often left our child behind and went traveling alone in the flying car. When she returned, she only said she had gone to the Western Hemisphere. Finally, she took me with her.
Our flying car traveled at Mach 4 for 2 hours before we could see the sun. It had just risen over the Pacific, no larger than a baseball, casting weak, cold light across the frozen ocean.
Kayoko hovered the car at 5,000 meters. Then she took a long object from the back. After removing its cover, I saw an amateur astronomical telescope. Kayoko opened the window, aimed it at the sun, and told me to look.
Through the colored lens, I saw the sun magnified hundreds of times. I could even see dark and bright patches moving slowly across its surface, and faint prominences along its edge.
Kayoko connected the telescope to the car computer and captured an image of the sun. Then she called up another solar image and said,
"This one is an image of the sun from 4 centuries ago."
The computer compared the 2 images.
Do you see?
Kayoko pointed at the screen.
Their brightness, pixel arrangement, pixel probabilities, layer statistics, all of it is exactly the same.
I shook my head.
What does that prove? A toy telescope, a low-grade image processing program, and you, an ignorant amateur. Stop tormenting yourself. Do not believe those rumors.
You are an idiot.
She said it, put the telescope away, and drove the flying car back. Above and below us, far away, I saw several other flying cars hovering just as we had been, with telescopes sticking from their windows and pointed at the sun.
In the following months, a terrifying claim spread around the world like wildfire. More and more people voluntarily observed the sun with larger and more precise instruments. Later, a civilian organization launched a group of probes toward the sun. 3 months later, they passed through the heliosphere. The data they sent back finally confirmed the fact.
Compared with 4 centuries earlier, the sun had not changed at all.
Now the underground cities on every continent became volcanoes of unrest. The situation could explode at any moment. One day, under a coalition government order, Kayoko and I sent our son to the child-rearing center. On the way home, both of us felt that the only bond holding our relationship together no longer existed. When we reached Central Square, we saw someone giving a speech, while others around him handed weapons to citizens.
Citizens, Earth has been betrayed. Humanity has been betrayed. Civilization has been betrayed. We are all victims of a super scam, a lie so vast and terrible that even God would faint from it. The sun is still the same sun. It will not explode, not now, not ever. It is the symbol of eternity. What exploded was the sinister ambition of those inside the coalition government. They invented all this to build their dictatorship. They ruined Earth. They ruined human civilization. Citizens with conscience, take up arms and save our planet.
Save human civilization. We will overthrow the coalition government, seize control of the Earth engines, and drive our planet back from this cold outer space to its original orbit, back into the warm embrace of our sun.
Kyoko walked forward in silence, took a submachine gun from one of the distributors, and joined the line of armed citizens. She did not look back. She disappeared with that vast column into the mist of the underground city. I stood there blankly, clutching in my pocket the medal my father had earned with his life and loyalty. Its edges cut my hand and drew blood.
3 days later, rebellion erupted on every continent at once.
Wherever the rebels went, people rose to support them. By then, few doubted that they had been deceived. I joined the coalition government's army, not because I firmly believed in the government, but because 3 generations of my family had served in the military. They had planted the seed of loyalty in me. Under any circumstance, betraying the coalition government was unimaginable.
America, Africa, Oceania, and Antarctica fell one after another. The coalition government pulled back its defenses to East Asia and Central Asia, where the Earth engines stood. The rebels soon surrounded the region and had overwhelming superiority. Their offensive made little progress for quite some time only because of the engines. They did not want to destroy them, so they avoided heavy weapons across that vast theater, allowing the government to survive a little longer.
The stalemate lasted 3 months. Then 12 coalition army groups defected one after another. The Central Asian and East Asian lines collapsed completely. 2 months later, the doomed coalition government and fewer than 100,000 troops were surrounded in the coastal Earth Engine Control Center.
I was a major in that remnant army. The control center was the size of a medium city, and at its heart was the Earth cockpit. With one arm burned by a laser beam, I lay in the wounded station. It was there that I learned Kyoko had died in the Australian campaign. Like everyone else in the station, I spent every day drunk, knowing nothing and caring nothing about the war outside. After an unknown time, I heard someone speaking loudly.
Do you know why you are like this? You are blaming yourselves. In this war, you stood on the side against humanity. So did I.
I turned and saw a star on the speaker's shoulder. He continued,
It does not matter. We still have one last chance to save our souls. The Earth cockpit is only 3 blocks from here. We will take it and hand it to rational humanity outside. We have fulfilled our duty to the coalition government. Now it is time to fulfill our duty to humanity.
With my uninjured hand, I drew my pistol and rushed with that suddenly fanatical group of wounded and unwounded men through the steel corridors toward the Earth cockpit. To our surprise, we met almost no resistance. More and more people joined us from the branching steel passages. At last, we reached a huge door so tall that its top could not be seen. It opened with a roar, and we rushed into the Earth cockpit.
Though all of us had seen it countless times on television, we were still stunned by its grandeur. Its size could not be judged visually, because the cockpit was submerged in a giant hologram, a simulation of the solar system. The image was essentially a black space extending infinitely in every direction. As soon as we entered, we seemed to float within it. Because the proportions were as realistic as possible, the sun and planets were all tiny, as small as distant fireflies, but still distinguishable.
Centered on the distant point of light,
that represented the sun, a striking red spiral spread outward like red ripples across a vast, black ocean. This was Earth's route. At the outermost point of the spiral, the route turned bright green, marking the path Earth had not yet completed. The green line swept above our heads. Following it, we saw a brilliant sea of stars. The green line vanished into its depths, and we could not see its end.
In that vast black space floated many bright specks of dust. A few drifted near, and I saw that they were virtual screens filled with complex numbers and curves.
Then I saw the Earth console watched by all humanity. It looked like a silver-white asteroid floating in the black space, and seeing it made the scale even harder to grasp. The console itself was a plaza. More than 5,000 people stood densely upon it, including the chief members of the coalition government, most of the Interstellar Migration Committee responsible for the Earth voyage plan, and those who remained loyal to the end. Then, the chief executive's voice sounded through the whole black space.
We could have fought to the end, but that might cause the Earth engines to lose control. If that happened, excess fusion material could burn through Earth or vaporize all the oceans. Therefore, we have decided to surrender. We understand, everyone, because in a struggle that has already lasted 40 generations and must continue for another 100, it is too much to demand that reason never fail. But please remember us, the more than 5,000 people standing here. Here are the chief executive of the coalition government and ordinary privates alike. We held faith to the end.
We all know we will not live to see the day truth is proven. But if humanity survives for 10,000 generations, then all future people will shed tears before our graves. This planet called Earth will be our eternal monument.
The enormous sealed doors of the control center opened with a roar. The more than 5,000 Last Earth faction loyalists came out in groups and were escorted by rebels toward the coast. Crowds packed both sides of the road. Everyone spat at them and threw ice and stones. Some had the visors of their sealed suits cracked. The cold below -100 degrees numbed their faces, but they kept walking. I saw a little girl lift a large chunk of ice with all her strength and smash it at an old man. Through her visor, her eyes blazed with mad hatred.
When I heard that all 5,000 had been sentenced to death, I thought the punishment too merciful. Only death? Could one death repay their crimes? Could it repay the destruction of Earth and human civilization by a grotesque fantasy and a monstrous lie? They should die 10,000 times. I thought of the astrophysicists who had predicted the solar explosion and the engineers who designed and built the Earth engines. They had been dead for a century, but I wanted to dig them from their graves and make them die 10,000 times too.
I was truly grateful to the executioners. They found these criminals a fitting death. They removed the nuclear batteries that heated each condemned person's sealed suit and left them on the sea ice, letting the cold of -100 degrees slowly take their lives.
Those most wicked and shameful criminals in the history of human civilization stood in a dark mass on the frozen sea. On the shore, more than 100,000 people watched. More than 100,000 sets of teeth clenched. More than 100,000 pairs of eyes burned with the same rage as that little girl's.
By then, all the Earth engines had been shut down, and magnificent stars appeared above the ice plain.
I could imagine the cold stabbing into their bodies like countless knives, their blood freezing, life draining from them little by little. That imagined sensation became pleasure and spread through my body. Watching those people slowly die in the torment of cold, the crowd on the shore grew joyful. Together, they began to sing O Sol Mio. I sang too, my eyes fixed on one direction in the starry sky. There, a slightly larger star had just begun to show a disk and shone yellow. That was the sun.
Ah, my son, mother of life, father of all things, my great God, my Lord. What could be more stable than you? What could be more eternal? We tiny carbon bacteria, smaller than dust, crowded on a pebble circling you, had dared predict your death. How could we have been so stupid?
An hour passed. The anti-human criminals on the sea still stood there, but not one was alive. Their blood had frozen.
Suddenly, I could see nothing. A few seconds later, my sight returned. The ice plain, the coast, and the crowd slowly developed before me, then became completely clear, clearer than before, because the world was now covered in intense white light. My blindness had been caused by the sudden blaze.
But the stars did not return. All starlight was drowned by that radiance, as if the universe had melted in light. The light burst from a single point in space. That point had become the center of the universe. It was in the direction I had just been staring. The sun's helium flash had erupted.
The chorus of O Sol Mio stopped at once. The more than 100,000 people on the shore froze, as if they too had become hard stone like the figures on the sea.
For the last time, the sun poured its light and heat onto Earth. First, the frozen carbon dioxide on the ground melted and rose as white vapor. Then, the surface of the sea ice began to melt. The unevenly heated ice roared with earth-shaking cracks. Gradually, the light falling on the ground softened, and a faint blue appeared in the sky. Later, auroras produced by the violent solar wind spread through the heavens, and enormous colored curtains flowed overhead.
In that sudden, brilliant sunlight, the last Earth faction loyalists still stood firmly on the sea, like more than 5,000 statues. The solar eruption lasted only a short time. 2 hours later, the blinding light began to fade rapidly, and soon it went out.
In the sun's place appeared a dark red sphere. It slowly expanded until, from Earth, it looked as large as the sun had once looked from Earth's original orbit. Its true size had already swollen beyond the orbit of Mars. Mercury, Venus, and Mars, Earth's companion planets, had become wisps of smoke and radiation of hundreds of millions of degrees.
But it was no longer the sun. It no longer gave light or heat. It looked like a cold sheet of red paper pasted onto space, its dark glow seeming only a scattering of surrounding starlight. This was the fate of a low-mass star, a red giant.
A magnificent 5 billion-year life had become a drifting dream. The sun was dead. Fortunately, some people were still alive. The wandering age.
When I recall all this, half a century has passed. 20 years ago, Earth sailed beyond Pluto's orbit and out of the solar system, continuing its lonely voyage through the cold vastness of interstellar space.
The last time I went to the surface was more than 10 years ago. My son and daughter-in-law accompanied me. She was a fair-haired, blue-eyed young woman, and she was about to become a mother.
After reaching the surface, the first thing I noticed was that although all the Earth engines were still running at full power, their giant beams could no longer be seen. Earth's atmosphere had vanished, so the plasma light no longer scattered. The ground was covered with strange, translucent crystal blocks, yellow and green intermingled. They were solid oxygen and nitrogen, frozen air.
Interestingly, the air had not frozen evenly across Earth's surface. It had formed irregular mounds like small hills. On the once smooth ice plains of the oceans, these translucent hills made a strange landscape. The Milky Way lay motionless across the sky, as if frozen too, but the starlight was bright enough to sting the eyes if one looked too long.
The Earth engines would run without interruption for 500 years. By then, Earth would have accelerated to 5/1000ths of light speed. It would coast at that speed for 1,300 years. After completing 2/3 of the voyage, Earth would turn its engines around and begin 500 years of deceleration. After 2,400 years of travel, Earth would reach Proxima Centauri, and after another 100 years, it would settle into orbit around that star as one of its satellites.
I know I have been forgotten. The wandering voyage is too long, too long. But call my name at that moment when dawn appears in the east again. I know I have been forgotten. The age of launch is too distant, but call my name at that moment when humanity sees blue sky again. I know I have been forgotten. The stories of the solar system are too old, but call my name at that moment when flowers return to the branches.
Whenever I hear this song, warmth flows into my old and rigid body, and my dry eyes grow wet again. I seem to see the 3 golden suns of Centaurus rising one after another above the horizon, bathing all things in their light. The solid air melts and becomes a blue sky. Seeds more than 2,000 years old wake in thawing soil, and the land turns green. I see my 100th generation descendants laughing on green grasslands, clear streams running through them, silver fish swimming in the water.
I see Kyoko running toward me across the green earth, young and beautiful, like an angel. Ah, Earth, my wandering Earth.